Frederick Douglass met with Mr. Lincoln the second time on August 19, 1864. This time, the president had called for Mr. Douglass. Now, the president was troubled about a few things. Number one, there was a war weariness in the country, in the North. You know, if you look at U.S. military history, Americans can be very enthusiastic when a war starts, but over time, the longer it goes on, the less support it gets. And people were getting tired of the war and they just wanted this thing to be over. And it seemed doubtful that the war could continue as an abolitionist war. From the beginning of 1863, the New York draft riots illustrated that, you know, you had people who said, look, I will fight for the Union, but I'm not going to fight for the freedom of black folk. The president was under criticism from the Copperheads. Now, these were Democrats who wanted to sue for peace no matter what. And he was actually under fire from abolitionists who thought that Mr. Lincoln was being a bit too lenient with the South and that the government did not care about the rights of black people. Now, at this point in 1864, Mr. Douglass was not very happy with Mr. Lincoln either, and he had been vocal about it. The equal pay issue, which he talked about with Mr. Lincoln in 1863, I think at that point it probably had just been settled, but Lincoln did not sign the Wade Davis bill. It passed the House, it passed the Senate, and it was in Mr. Lincoln's pocket. It ended up being a pocket veto. And that bill stated that in order for Confederate states to come back into the Union, more than 50% of the voting population had to swear allegiance to the Union and say that they never supported the Confederacy. Mr. Lincoln's plan was the 10% plan. He only wanted 10% to do the same thing. The problem with that is you get 10% of the people to say, you know, we're loyal. What about the other 90%? You know, those individuals end up running for politics, end up in state or federal levels, and then they'd be in control again. And so that was a problem. And there was Northern hostility against black suffrage, and the Union government showed no enthusiasm about allowing blacks in southern states that were occupied by the Union to vote. And so that was a problem as well. And Mr. Douglass feared that the very same individuals who were asked to defend the country would at some point be under the same slave power that they were trying to destroy would be ruling over them again. And so that was a concern of Mr. Douglass. And Congress, in their Reconstruction plan, did not include a plan for blacks to vote. And by May of 1864, Mr. Douglass was looking to support the Fremont-Cochrane ticket. Now, Mr. Lincoln wanted to meet with Mr. Douglass for two reasons. Number one, Mr. Lincoln had drafted a letter and he wanted to, address it to his critics. He was trying to defend himself and he ran it past Douglass. And Mr. Douglass is like, look, man, folk are going to talk. Don't even respond, right? People are going to talk, don't respond. And so Mr. Lincoln never sent the letter. The second point was this. Mr. Lincoln feared that this war was going to end in a negotiated peace, and he wanted Mr. Douglass to take some people to go down behind Confederate lines and spread the word to as many enslaved individuals that they could that the war was over, well, that the Emancipation Proclamation had freed them. And Mr. Lincoln understood that the Emancipation Proclamation was merely a war measure. It was not a humanitarian effort. And he feared that at the end of the war, that the Emancipation Proclamation would no longer be valid. And, he's like, look, whoever makes it inside the Union lines will probably be free. Those who do not will probably remain enslaved. You're talking about a country that probably would have been half free, half enslaved. And so that was a problem as well. And that supports the fallacy that the Emancipation Proclamation freed individuals. It took the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which was in December of 1865, to the degree that it did abolish slavery, for slavery to be abolished. And he wanted Douglass to go down and get as many enslaved people as he possibly could. Now, this thing worried Mr. Lincoln. And Mr. Douglass saw that, this was a deeper moral conviction for Mr. Lincoln, this anti-slavery stance that he took. Now, Mr. Lincoln did not think he was going to win the election of 1864. And so that's why he's going through all of these different things. But three things happened in late summer, early fall of 1864. Sherman captured Atlanta, number one. Number two, Admiral Farragut won the battle at Mobile Bay, which was also a critical communications point for the Confederacy. And General Philip Sheridan had won the Shenandoah campaign, which was, I think he finally won the thing in the fall. It was a series of battles, but that pretty much turned the tide in favor of the Union. And Mr. Lincoln rode that momentum into the election of 1864. Because up until the summer of 1864, the Confederacy could have still won the war according to their definition of winning. But there are two leadership points that we can glean from this thing. Number one, a leader should be secure in his position, and we see that in Mr. Lincoln's administration. He brought people into his cabinet who at some point were probably adversaries. He had no problems finding somebody who had more expertise than he did in certain areas and put them in there and let them do what they did best. He didn't say, oh my goodness, this person is a threat to me, let me go sit them down and find somebody of lesser quality. He didn't do that. But the other thing that we can learn from this is, a good leader always seeks good counsel. And that's what Mr. Lincoln did. He didn't have a problem going to people and asking them for his advice. And some of those people were kind of fierce, and Mr. Douglas was one of them. But he understood that Mr. Douglas's advice or counsel was not only wise, but it was apropos for the moment. And that particular encounter, the second time around, there was another individual gentleman who was waiting to see Mr. President, and somebody came and announced the gentleman twice, and Mr. Lincoln's like, look, I'm trying to have a long talk with my friend Douglas. When Mr. Douglas left the White House, he was once again looking to support Mr. Lincoln.